Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today, Clint Decker from Great Awakenings. And first off, Clint, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and
Good to be here, Doug.
Share with us, because I love Great Awakenings and have for since you started it, and it's awesome. Now, so Clint, fill us in. What is Great Awakenings?
Well, Great Awakenings, just for full disclosure, you do serve on our board of directors.
I do.
And this
and have since the beginning.
Right.
20 years.
Yep. April 2004 is when the Ministry of Great Awakenings was founded, and you were on our advisory board leading up to 2004. And then you also served on our regular board of directors, which you have just all these years. So one of the exciting things about, and I've appeared on the show before, but that's different in comparison to this year, is this is our 20th anniversary of reaching small communities for Christ, rural communities for Christ, in Kansas, throughout the Central Plains, different parts of the country, and even internationally. So it's exciting to be here. Actually, as we are producing this program, this particular week, the week of April 8th, is actually the week that we received our 501c3 letter that gave us approval from the IRS that we're tax exempt status. And I kind of look at that as sort of, we're official now, kind of hold that up. The IRS says we're official. So 20 years ago this week was a real special day. I don't know, I might get a birthday cake or an anniversary cake or something and celebrate.
That'd be a good idea. Your wife would love that.
Yeah.
And it's gone by just like that, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah, it has. When you're not looking at the calendar, things go by fast. And we have our 9-year-old and 3-year-old great-grandchildren living with us. And, of course, for them, everything takes forever, because they're looking at the clock. But when you get our age, you're not looking at the clock too much, and it just goes by.
It goes by in a hurry.
It?
It certainly does. Well, Clint, when you had the idea for Great Awakenings, of course, I know most of those things from having been a part of it. But why Great Awakenings? Why did you pick that name?
Well, that's a good question. It goes back. The ministry started in 2004, and in the late 90s, I began to explore the vision. And the name Great Awakenings originated a little bit in American history. There was a couple different Great Awakenings, actually spiritual Great Awakenings involving like Jonathan Edwards, a great theologian of generations past, and George Whitefield that came from England and crossed the seas several times. And then the Methodist movement was in America, in the pioneer days, and God used these people to create great awakenings, spiritual awakenings. And so in the late 90s, as I was just kind of looking at the landscape of America and just began to pray, Lord, would you bring revival or a great awakening to the United States? I kind of took the name from that. And more specifically, it's that God would just use our ministry to bring a great awakening in the hearts of people that are irreligious, don't know Christ, would awaken them to the good news of Jesus for them, that they'd be awakened and willing to listen and engage in conversation about what that is. And then for those who are in the church, there are around 300,000 churches in the United States. And so thousands and thousands of people are every Sunday morning are in church. But unfortunately, a lot of these churches are just kind of maybe spiritually dead. Just there's not much life in them. That God would bring a great awakening in the hearts of evangelical believers across America. We just awaken them with a fresh love and a fresh passion for the Word of God and a fresh passion for the gospel again and for Jesus.
And Great Awakenings reaches how far of an area? I know that, of course, you're based out of Clay Center, Kansas, and that's a good spot right in the middle of Kansas.
Right.
But what area are you reaching out to?
Well, that's a little bit of tricky to answer because we do have some media outreach with that media outreach through our newspaper column, a self-syndicated column. It goes out into around 15 states, a lot of that in the central U.S., we have a distribution of around 1 million people, around 300 papers, so that reaches far. But then on a more local level, I do preaching in a lot of small and rural churches, and most of that is in Kansas and in Nebraska, sometimes Arkansas, and so that's a little bit of a smaller reach there. And then there's some international reach by me going in person to different countries and different parts of the world, really focusing on reaching like pastors and evangelists and missionaries and church planners, Sunday school teachers, youth workers, children's workers that kind of serve in a rural context in their country. And so it just kind of depends. Our reach just kind of is affected by exactly that type of outreach that we're doing.
And of course, we'll put up the contact information on the screen for those who maybe want to get in touch with you. But we're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest, Clint Decker from Great Awakenings. And Clint, before we cut away for break, while we were talking about your time overseas and going to other churches and so forth, and I find it amazing because I remember your first newspaper article that you wrote, and now you're at how many newspapers?
We send it out to close to 300 newspapers.
And that's a lot.
About 15 states, about 1 million circulation. And it started out, in the early years in 2006 as a monthly, I just wrote one column a month. And then a couple of years ago, we did sort of a rebranding. We changed the name, changed a little bit of the style in which I wrote, and then also moved from a monthly to a weekly. And it turned out to be a good move, and we've actually had more people that have been communicating with us, and papers are running us on a more regular basis, and which obviously helps connect with the reader who's looking at it. And most of the time, my column is written in small town newspapers, and a lot of most counties have at least one newspaper to help with showing, what's happening locally, some, county commissioners, things happening in the community, things happen in the local schools, local churches and stuff. And I usually get put on the church page. And so it's, but unfortunately, in America today, small town newspapers are just dying. They're not able to financially to make it. And so we are so grateful for the small town newspapers that still exist and are willing to put us in there. We don't charge we offer it free of charge, and we're so grateful for those that put us in.
Yeah, and I remember, of course, how we set that part up because it was your idea, and we said, okay, let's take a state and let's concentrate on that state and reach out to all of the newspapers. And that's after that one takes off, then now let's go to the next state. And so it's amazing to be up to 15 states already because, you can say, there's a lot of states still to go. But look at the progress that's being made, and your articles are excellent. I've written 500 and some articles of a different nature, but it's all faith-based. And then I read yours and say, how come I can't write mine as good as Clint does his?
Yeah, and this year we're looking to going into Arkansas and to see if trusting God to open up some doors. And I write on a variety of subjects. It has changed over the years. We had a major cultural shift in our country in 2020. It's hard to explain, but all of a sudden our culture just became a whole lot more sensitive and divided on all kinds of issues. So I would typically, take, what is a popular subject that people are reading, what's on the news, and then I'll write about it and write, what does God have to say about this? Well, as the years went by, I all of a sudden would receive responses from editors. Hey, we can't run this. Hey, this is too hot topic. Hey, this might divide our community. And especially it hit a peak in 2020, where I actually wrote on the subject of transgenderism. And I had one editor say, and this is not my words, this is their words, that if I run this could cause a riot in the community. And I thought, me? Hardly anybody knows who I am. Why would I cause a riot? But I heard this type of thing, and so I thought, I got to change my style a little bit. And so I changed my style. I didn't compromise what I believe, but I just tried to be a little more wise in how I wrote, to be able to still get my ideas that come from God's words published without getting, I guess, a word that came up in 2020, which is called deplatformed, from newspapers. So I'm so grateful for the editors out there that still believe in sort of freedom of speech, and they're willing to publish things even if they're a little bit dicey, to be able to challenge, what people think, about certain issues.
Yeah. Well, if you take a look at what one of the things you said at the beginning of this, I go to a lot of small churches to reach out to them. What area are you talking about? How wide of an area from your home base at Clay Center?
Well, I live in north central Kansas, and so a lot of it is around there. But like recently, I was in Glen Elder, Kansas, which is near Wakanda Lake, beautiful Wakanda Lake, and then also down in Yates Center in southeast Kansas over Easter. And then I've been to Hill City and Scott City and all kinds of other cities all over Kansas, and some places in Nebraska, Iowa, and Arkansas, and so forth. The other day I was listening into Johnny Cash's song, where I've been everywhere, man, and as I was singing along, I started to recite all the different cities I preached in. I've been everywhere, man, been Yates Center, Hill City, all these different, preached all these different towns. So over 20 years of ministry, it's wonderful to be able to go to all these different places and to share God's Word.
And that's awesome. That reminds me when Connie, my wife, and I will be driving down the road, and there'll be a song that comes on, and I'll turn it up and start singing with it. And very, very quickly it is, stop it, shut it off. So obviously I don't have any singing ability. What about overseas? Because I know we've got just a little bit of time left in this segment, but you've been overseas and did ministry work in Kenya?
Yeah, in 20 years of ministry, God provided the opportunity to go to India once, Nicaragua once, and then to Kenya twice, and I'm going to be returning back to Kenya in June for a third time. And we have developed actually an official partnership with the Manna Bible Institute, also called Manna College, just south of Nairobi, the nation's capital. And I have just become one of their professors of evangelism. And so our partnership is I go over there once a year and have 1 week of classes where I teach current students, alumni, and just the general public that wants to come, and then engage in a week of also of outreaches, different kinds of outreaches and sharing the gospel. And so I've typically done these things by myself in the past, but this year God provided a college student attending a Christian college with a call to missions that is going to go with me. So I'm excited to do something I haven't done before, to bring someone along with me, to give them the opportunity to spread their wings. And so it's going to be an exciting time as we prepare to head there in just a couple months.
Yeah, and that will be in Kenya.
Right.
All right, we're going to cut away and take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Kenya and what's taking place over there. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Clint Decker, Great Awakenings. And Clint, before we cut away for break, we were talking a little bit about Kenya. And that's a major trip from here to Kenya. And you fly over, and then you are, would you say, teaching at a college over there?
Yeah, the Manna Bible Institute sits on about 5 acres. They have a campus with a few different buildings, and it also is combined with a college. And the pastor, combined with the local church, and the local church called Manna Community Church, the pastor of that is also the administrator of the college. So kind of have two different entities that kind of work together there. But they have a number of professors that are Kenyans, but then they also have foreign professors, like from Western countries, that come in every once in a while for special things, and I'm one of those. And I'm part and a professor of the evangelism class, which is a program that students can enroll in and over a period of time, I think, get a diploma or certificate and actually graduate from. And so this is the second year I'll be going over there and having a week of classes. And last year there was about 100 students that came. So this year, probably a little bit at the same. And my focus is going to be teaching on the office and the work of the evangelist. And then after we get done, the students go out and put into practice what they've learned, hitting the streets to engage in people with conversation. And in the evening, we have like an outdoor festival or crusade, which I'll be the featured speaker, to be able to share the gospel in neighborhoods. And that'll be combined with all kinds of various ministry opportunities that just kind of come up, other speaking opportunities and so forth.
What other religions are there? Is there?
Well, that's a good question to
competing?
ask. Yeah, actually, in the late 90s, there was some type of activity that took place in Somalia that with the government that resulted in all kinds of Somalis fleeing the country, going to other East African nations. And many of them went right across the border into Kenya. And so since the late 90s, there's been tens of thousands of Somalis that have just come in to Kenya. And some of them have made their way into the area where the Manna Bible Institute is. And a number of years ago, a wealthy Somali Muslim actually built a mosque, built a Muslim school, and built a number of apartments for Somalis to come and live in right across from the college. And the businessman said the reason that he chose that location to do this is because he became aware of the effectiveness of the college and of the Manna Community Church that they were having on the neighborhood. So they came in there as just a tool of the devil to try to fight against that. And so that's one of the places we're going to be ministering, is just literally right across the street to some Muslims that live in the area, and then others, that aren't Muslim and they're not religious. There's people that are called street families in America. We call them homeless families that just live on the streets. And the college and the church will be ministering to them, as well.
And then when you have conflict between those religions, it can get very serious, risky.
Well, not so much. That is what is portrayed in the media.
Okay.
But there really, most of the time, there isn't the risk of any type of danger.
Good.
Now, you go up in the northeastern part of Kenya, really unreached area that borders Somalia. There is some danger there. As a matter of fact, I read a news article just recently that the terrorist group called Al-Shabaab, which comes out of Somalia, crosses back and forth in the northeast Kenya border, actually killed a few Christians that were attempting to try to share the gospel with Muslims. But otherwise, the whole country of Kenya, isn't in danger, things like that. And not all Muslims are terrorists either. There's a good percentage of some that are, but not all of them are. But the area where we are going to be at, that's right across from the college, they're very friendly, willing to be able to listen, and God has changed a lot of their lives.
I would think so. And then, we assume in the United States that, I'm going to come from where I live and I'm going to go up to the college to listen to Clint. But these folks, by and large, coming from areas that are very isolated, and they're either walking or there isn't just get in the car and drive up here. How are they? How does this work?
Last year, among the 100 students that came, there's a few of them that drove or that came about 9 hours. Some of them have vehicles, but some of them don't. They don't own any type of a car or a bicycle or anything else. So they travel back and forth via something like a taxi, or they find something to rent, somebody to drive them. So it just kind of depends upon a person's means and and what they're able to have. But it's a mixture of bicycle, renting something, having their own car. It just kind of depends. But some of them come from 9+ hours away. Some of them come just an hour away. But yeah, it's definitely a mix. And when they do come, no matter how far they come hungry and ready to learn. We Americans, Doug, we can learn a lot from these hungry Kenyans. This is why in the continent of Africa, for well over 100 years, God has been doing an incredible move. It's like a revival in the continent of Africa for many generations now. And so it's a joy to go over there to step my feet in that revival fire in that continent.
I know when you originally went over there, you had a different role that you would be serving, and very soon as you started talking to them, it just took off. Numbers started coming in, and they were very hungry, and still are very hungry for what you have to say. Yes,
they are. Last year when we went, there was around 70-something students on the first day, and word began to spread, and people began to trickle in, and by the end of the week, God had grown that to about 100. I imagine this something similar will probably happen this year. Again, it doesn't necessarily communicate anything about me, my speaking ability or marketing or promotion. It's just the hunger that is in the heart of the people of Africa. They are hungering to draw near to God, and those that are believers in Christ, they just want more of the Lord, and they're passionate about evangelism and going proclaiming the gospel.
Yeah, and I know from what you had told me before, when the first few days you were over there, first time we talked while you were over there anyway, and you said they're so hungry, they're so attentive to what's going on. They have questions that they want to ask because this is just amazing to them. And you still find that to be the situation? You anticipate it will be anyway?
Yes, and many of these are they're male and female from middle school age kids all the way up to those in their 60s and 70s that have been experienced evangelists, pastors, and missionaries. But even though some of them have more experience than I do, they just want to know more. And there's a guy last year that he wasn't a pastor. He actually earned PhD. He was a professional, like a psychologist or something like that. And he took a week off of work out of his professional white collar job to want to come just learn more about the Bible. I don't know too many folks in America that are Christians who are white collar jobs that would just take a week off work, the vacation time, and instead of going to Branson, or instead of going to the lake or traveling somewhere, they go, hey, I'm going to take my week of vacation and I'm just going to go somewhere to a Bible conference to learn more about God.
Wow.
That just shows the hunger of the people.
Yeah, that's exciting. And we're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. Clint Decker is not only my friend, but he's with us here today. So, Clint, what do you have coming up? What do you see coming up?
Well, in the international scene, in 2024, which is this year, we were supposed to go to Israel in the fall. But because of the war, it started on October 7th in 2023, it impacted that. Not in the way you might think, not in terms of security, but it impacted things in terms of availability of things and the cost of airfare and so forth. And so we actually had to postpone the trip until the end of March and the beginning of April of 2025. So if people want to, I know that our contact information is on the screen. And so people can reach out to me if they would like to go on a Great Awakenings Israel Tour teaching trip with us, and we can get people information on that, and I'll be doing some teaching, as a part of that. It'll be the end. I don't have the exact dates. It's like the end of March 2025 and the beginning of April 2025. So I'm looking forward to that.
Clint, thank you so much for taking time to stop and come over, and we're just anxious to see how all of this is going to work, and you've got a lot going, and all of the contact information's on the screen, so we trust people will get in touch with you. Clint, thank you.
Have a good day, Doug.
And thank you, folks. Thanks for watching.